Have at it.
Okay, so
No.
why do we always start with
So?
We
Yeah.
always start with so. It's so embarrassing. So embarrassing.
It's so
I
embarrassing.
can only hear that word.
So.
No, I'm not going to do so.
I don't even have another word. All right, Jessica and Kim. I brought you here today.
Yeah, you did.
We got a good Twitter question by @PandoraMixyMix.
Good name.
Good name. Gonna
Makes
call
me
him
think of Sir
Michael.
Mix-a-Lot.
Oh. His name is Michael. We're gonna call him Michael from now on.
Okay.
He asked a good question about how we read queries. Do we read the sample query or synopsis in any particular order? So I thought because we all read queries kind of differently, we can
I'm not going to argue
discuss
with you
how we go. We can
argue.
discuss.
So I think am I the only one that doesn't allow samples?
there. Probably. You're like that.
I know, now I'm feeling like this guilt. I tend to go through my queries and really I'm just looking for the voice and the hook within the query itself. And so, honestly, I get so many queries and I like to make it as efficient a process as possible. And so I don't ask for samples, but I do think that then I tend to request more than I would otherwise, because if I like the query, if it sounds decent, I'm intrigued, then I'm just immediately going to request the full manuscript, and I figure I can sample your writing there. Whereas I think it would just make my response times a lot longer if I would ask for the sample material, and then I think I would probably be less likely to request in general.
I mean, I asked for the sample material only because picture books, it's quick and easy to read.
I think it would be different, yeah.
But I leave it on for everything, and then I don't always refer to it, but it's good to have there in case I'm completely unsure.
On picture books, do you read the sample even sometimes without reading the query?
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes. A lot of times I'll just skim the query because if your whole book is right there, I'm going to read the whole book.
Right.
I feel like I'd get a better sense. Some people just can't write queries for the life of them.
Well, it's almost as long as the query.
Right.
The sample.
Yeah,
Right.
and I'd rather just get a sense of the book and what your other books might be like. But for a full-length fiction, if the query's not grabbing me, I'm not going to read your sample because I'm just wasting my time.
Yeah. I do request samples, and I probably only read them 10% of the time.
Right.
I look at queries, and, I think this is the example that it's like when I shop for books at a bookstore. So I'm reading the query as if I'm reading the back cover copy, and if it's intriguing, then I will usually just buy the book. I've never been one of those people who reads a few pages in the bookstore either. I tend to read the sample only if I'm on the fence. And there are times when I will request more based on the sample, but typically I make my judgment on query alone and don't usually read the sample.
Right. And do either of you request the synopsis? I don't.
I always do.
When you request, when you ask, like...
Right, when I request...
I don't have the synopsis attached to the query, but yes, if I am requesting the full manuscript, I ask for the synopsis with it.
And then I rarely peek at it unless I'm curious.
I never read the synopsis first.
Right. I always read the book first. Unless I'm unsure, then I like to have that synopsis there to see if maybe there's something it's going to make me keep going.
Yeah.
The synopsis for me is like the sample. I tend not to read it at all unless when I read the synopsis is usually when I'm pretty sure I'm going to reject the book, but I'm curious if there's something there that will keep me reading.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But I don't always read the synopsis either.
I always do.
Really?
Well, no. Okay, if I request the full and it's just not working at all and I know that it's a certain reject, then I won't probably look at the synopsis. But most of the time I do look at the synopsis because I'm not a very patient person. So
I never would have guessed that.
So if I am reading and liking, I will think to myself, well, I hope this isn't going to blow up and be bad. So then I'm going to read the synopsis. I'm like, oh no, it really is going to have a good story arc or whatever. But also, I think if I really love, a lot of times I love the voice, but I feel like I don't know where it's going, and that's when I'll look at the synopsis. But I would say 75% of the time I do read the synopsis.
I also think the synopsis can help, especially in a situation with an author where there's a time factor involved. Like they have other offers and we have a limited time we have to get back to them. If I'm absolutely loving the book and I'm 99% sure I want to offer, but I haven't finished it, I may go to the synopsis just to make sure that the book, the strength of the plot still follows through, and I can call and offer a representation or set up the call before I finish the book.
What about the synopsis? So, how do you feel about length of synopses?
Short.
Yeah.
No more than 3 pages, preferably.
Yeah, I like 2 to 3.
I like 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the idea of the synopsis is it's supposed to be a quick read, so I can either get back to the book or whatever it's useful.
Yeah.
So if it's a 10-page synopsis, that's going to take me forever to read it.
Might as well just read the book.
Yeah.
And synopses are dull, and they take a long time to get through. Like, I lose my attention.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You know.
I feel like that used to be a bigger topic of conversation than it is now.
Length?
People, yeah.
No, it still comes up.
Does it?
It's still trendy, but it's trendy when it's time.
But do you think most agents just feel like we do, that they should be shorter now? Because I feel like
they should.
it used to be. If they're smart, they'll have the same opinions that we do. But I don't know. I just feel like it used to be more of a subjective thing, and now I don't know. I feel like most of the synopses that I do get are like shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of synopses I'm getting that are 1 page and give me just as much information as the query. So that's the flip side of things. Yes. I don't want to read a 10-page, but I don't want to read your query a second time.
Right.
So make sure that your synopsis should be a full, detailed plot.
I agree. I think the synopsis needs to cover the key plot points, and to me, it also needs to be representative of the type of book. So, if you're writing romantic suspense, I need to see the key plot points of the suspense, but I also need to see in the synopsis how the romance is going to play out.
Right, and that is a good point for fantasy and sci-fi. You have to allow world building in your synopsis, even if it's just listing things.
And historical as well.
Right, because you have to ground, the same way you're grounding your reader in your submission, you have to ground them in the synopsis. Just to make contextual sense.
Yeah.
I feel like this, I forget where, but this came up recently, maybe on one of our Ask Agent things, but about, I think there's a difference between your query blurb and your synopsis in terms of, ruining the ending or
Correct.
Whatever. I think for the query blurb, it's more like the back of the book where you're not necessarily going to be spelling out exactly what's going to happen. But with the synopsis, I think you always have to tell what the ending is and spoil it.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's about showing the arc of the story. I want to see that it comes to a climax and then a satisfying conclusion, and it's not just like one big question mark.
Yeah. Writing a synopsis without showing the ending is doing you a disservice as the author, because that's why we're reading the synopsis. We want to know that you can carry through what you started in those first chapters that we've read.
And if you can't boil your book down to a synopsis that has that clear arc, there's probably something wrong with the book.
Exactly.
You're probably not, your book's
excited.
Your book structure is probably not as concise as you think it is.
Correct.
Yeah, I think in my impatience, the way I do things is I read the chapters first to see if I like your voice, and if I'm reading enough to see that I like your voice, because I am trying to get through my submissions quickly, like any agent or editor is, I then go to the synopsis to see if you can plot, because those are the two main things in my mind, if you have a good voice and if you can plot it.
That's usually how I read submissions too.
Yeah.
And not that it's meant as a test, but it becomes a test when you don't do a synopsis. It drives me crazy when I ask for a full manuscript and a synopsis, and authors just conveniently forget the synopsis. And I don't intend the request for the synopsis to be a test, but it does sort of become an indication of how easy are you going to be to work with when from the very beginning you can't follow through. And I would say that when it's time to start querying, don't even start until you have that manuscript completely ready, as well as a synopsis, because people are going to ask for the synopsis.
And then that synopsis even helps you write your query.
Yeah, it should. It should help you write your book.
When we're writing pitches, I consult the synopsis because it's already boiled down as much as it can be, and I just have to pull out all the parts I need.
Yep.
So, book, synopsis, query, get it right.
Wow, there you go.